Blog Talk Radio.
Carol the Coach. Sex, love, and relationships. We talk about it here.
Carol the Coach. Compassion with contemporary relevance.
I am a psychotherapist. I can be your personal life coach, and I can help you with your issues. There are no problems too small or too big. You can talk about anything.
Speaker, columnist, radio TV host, and commentator. Carol the Coach brings messages of wellness and empowerment within reach of everyday people every day.
Almost 5 years ago, I lost my soulmate in an accident. He was killed in a plane crash. Life just, for me, has seemed to stop.
There are groups all over the city. I teach one. It is a specific way to start thinking so that you shift how you see the world, which then shifts your energy, and then you feel better and you actually see things differently.
Carol the Coach. Always available, too, at carolthecoach.com.
Now, I've got Russell on the line.
I'm 47 years old. I'm a truck driver. I'm married. I have a wife in San Francisco.
Okay.
I haven't been home in 6 months. My thing is, I don't know if I have a sex addiction or what the problem is. Why do I want what I can't have? And as soon as I can have it, I don't want it anymore.
You're right on target when you say, I don't know if I have a sexual addiction. Well, guess what? Yes, you do. And you know what? That's my specialty, Russell, so you're at the right place. Continue.
I meet women online, and I'm in a different part of the country. I travel all 48 states, so I love sex.
I hear self-esteem issues. You never felt good enough, and you didn't feel like you were getting what you should have then, and you're reenacting that now. Do you want to change that about yourself?
You get what you need. Oh, Russell is always wondering what he can do to get better. And tonight we're going to be talking about intimacy disorders. And you know that sex addicts have intimacy disorders. So the issue is, how do you find love? And how do you bring about that closeness that you so desire as you're in recovery and working on your own sexual addiction? Hi, I'm Carol the Coach, and I am glad to be with you. I noticed that intro was a little fuzzy, and so we'll get on that and see what's going on. My board is a little bit different today. So last week I replayed a show. I was in Washington, D.C., and I wasn't sitting here on the air. So this week I'm sitting here on the air, and I'm like going, okay, something's going down with my intro. So I'll follow up on that and see if we can't get that working better. I don't want it to be fuzzy. You know, life is all about choices. And our guest tonight, Danielle, is going to be talking about what choices you can make to bring about love. And many addicts question what love is. You know, they come in and they say, Carol, I don't even think I know what love is. I don't know that I know how to give to somebody else. That can always be an issue. And so tonight we're going to talk about it. So this is the show for you to listen to if you want to improve your relationship, or you want to find love, or you want to feel that it's A-okay to have self-love. You know, I'm doing a lot of stuff around post-traumatic growth right now, and I'm doing workshops all over the country. And, I want to give a big shout-out to Alex and Bruno. They were my Microsoft guys that helped me with my PowerPoint presentation. I was having some difficulties, and so I went to that store. They're amazing. And I told them, I said, you know, I'm going to be on the air in about an hour, and I'm going to give you a shout-out. They're in their young 20s, I would imagine, and they were pretty curious about sexual addiction. As you and I both know, if you've been listening to the show, early 20s is a time when behaviors can become compulsive. And yet they're becoming compulsive and they don't seem dangerous. So to Alex and Bruno and all my younger 20-something listeners, be it a male or female, I want to say that this is a show that you can tune in when you're beginning to worry about your issues. Now, this is also going to be a great show if you're wanting to build relationship skills. Danielle's going to be discussing how love is a choice and how one has to make that daily. You may have heard me talking about the 5 love languages, and in that book, it's probably the most widely represented book on loving relationships. Dr. Gary Chapman says love is a verb. It's all about serving. And so she has really been doing some studying about the fact that her relationships with people have gotten deeper, more meaningful, and better as she's realized that, love is not this romantic love we see on the movies. Love is action. Love is what you're doing with somebody, for somebody. And she says, what love means to me is ever evolving. And it now looks a lot less like a romantic comedy, and she fantasizes about it differently. It's much more realistic. And that's clearly what so many people feel like they're looking for in a relationship. They're looking for what they see in the movies, similar to sex. I've said it before, my sex addicts, the men and women that I work with are really not after sex. They're after the experience, the high, the adrenaline rush, either before, during, or after sex that isn't necessarily physiologically based on sex. It's about the seduction. It's about the risk. It's about the thrill. But it's not really about the sex. So, I realize that I'm kind of all over the place. This is going to be an interesting show because I love to talk about love. I'm a very realistic therapist, and I am constantly talking to people about what they need to do for the other person. I had a woman on, she was somebody that I was seeing this weekend, and she said to me, it's been about 5 months, and I have not had sex with my husband. Now, he is a great guy, and he does not have a sex addiction. And actually, she even is in the military, and she had done a military training, and he got to go visit her over the weekend, and he did attempt to be romantic. And she just said, I put on weight. I don't feel good. I'm stressed with the kids. I'm not sure I really like my job, and I don't want to be sexual. And I said, you know what? I really think that sex is a gift. She admitted that the medication that she was on might be impacting her desire for sex. And I said it would be a very loving gift for you to make this relationship work by offering him the gift of sex. I pointed to my plaque on my windowsill that says "Fake it till you make it," and that plaque can really make people mad because they, of course, think I'm talking about faking orgasms, and I'm not. Anybody who's in 12-step recovery really knows that fake it till you make it means you act as if. So she doesn't feel sexual, but she needs to act as if she is sexual, and she will feel better. That is my promise. And most people that don't particularly want to have sex admit that if they can get into the actual act, it's much better than they thought it would be. Now, if you've been traumatized, assaulted, raped, hurt, those are issues that definitely require the help of a sex addiction therapist or a sex therapist in general. But if you're somebody who's overstressed, you're overworked, you're not getting enough sleep, you've lost your libido, you're on medication, your hormones are changing, I am a real believer in going ahead and figuring out a way to use that big sex organ, your mind, and take your life to the next level and give that gift to your partner, to your husband, to your wife. And I know I interviewed Michelle Weiner Davis, who wrote The Sex-Starved Wife, because men are becoming more and more anorexic. And, certainly in sex addiction, we see a lot of sexual anorexia. And so I really am a believer in being realistic, giving to your partner, service, and I don't mean servicing them sexually. I mean services in what can you do for that person. And I'm really looking forward to Danielle and I talking. She's a female love addict, and she has really made it her mission to improve her relationships. She takes her life to the next level, and that's what I love. She doesn't just sit around. In my group, we frequently talk about how do you develop more intimacy in a relationship. And I got to tell you, the first thing is you have to be real and admit your feelings. And when I say that, what I'm really saying is that addicts talk out of both sides of their mouth. They don't mean to, but they really do minimize, rationalize, justify. I had a guy the other day, and he was in group, and he said, I've had a really good week. And then I looked at him, and I said, you've been a slug all week. You said you've been really depressed. You haven't had any energy. You haven't wanted to go to work. How can you tell these guys you've had a really good week? And he said, well, comparatively speaking to other weeks, I've had a good week. And I said, that's not being real. So get real with your feelings. Share them in safe ways. If your wife or husband is furious with you because you're a sex addict and you don't feel like you can share feelings, then find somebody that is a healthy person to share feelings with, a therapist, the 12-step groups, certainly group therapy. What we know is when you share those feelings in group, then you share them outside, and it makes it easier. And if you say it once, it's easier to say it again. That's why group therapy, 12-step groups, individual therapy, they're all such powerful motivators to get real with your feelings. And then, it's about empathy, being able to put your partner first. And then next time I do the show, I'm going to bring you a list of some statements that you can say that has nothing to do with your feelings. It has to do with the other person's feelings. And whenever you can use reflective listening and check in with somebody and clarify what they're thinking and how they're feeling, you're going to have more connection. And you've heard me say this over and over again, that you need to, in a relationship, especially where addiction's concerned, you need to create more safety, which is the foundation, more connection, which usually has to do with quality time and communication, and that builds trust. And any marriage, any partnership can use that, no matter how healthy it is. You always want to make somebody feel safe, connected, and they need to be able to feel like they can trust you. And even in a relationship where there has not been severe betrayal, there are still times that somebody may not feel safe. I had a woman just the other day that said that her husband said to her, you've gained so much weight, I am, he didn't use the word disgusted, but it was similar to that. I'm disgusted by you. Now, how safe do you think she felt? And how do you think that affected her libido? And what kind of communication did that enhance? I got to tell you, it didn't enhance any. She built up some resentment, and she felt inferior, and she shut down around him. She turned inwards. And so really we have to think about the impact and the choices we use in terms of what we say. I'm not a big proponent of Dr. Phil, but one of the things he said in his book on relationship strategies is that you need to be honest, but you don't need to say everything. If it's cruel, if it's going to hurt, if it's not going to build the relationship, I always say if it's not going to contribute to the relationship in a positive way, if it's going to contaminate it, it's probably something that you need to leave unsaid and or figure out a way to share what the issue is in a healthy way. So it's all about love tonight, and I am so pleased to have Danielle on the show talking about a lot of the research she's been doing on this subject so that she can have healthy relationships. Really admire sex addicts and partners who go that extra step to take their life to the next level. So, Danielle, welcome to the show.
Thank you. How are you this evening?
Well, I am absolutely great. And, I just so appreciate you coming on and talking about something that we all need to hear more about. A lot of my addicts that I talk to and their partners start questioning if they even really know what love is. I'm kind of wondering, what is your definition of love?
That's a great question to start off with. And as I mentioned to you before while we were kind of getting it together that we're going to do this, it's ever evolving for me. But what I'm coming to understand is that it's very simple. I've spent a lot of my life trying to complicate it, what it should look like, who I'm going to give it to, my love that is, whose I'm going to accept, etc. And what it looks like is, for me, is just being helpful and authentic and expressing what's already within me, which is a desire to be purposeful and intentional about how I treat others. Not necessarily the golden rule, but I think I heard it called the platinum rule, treating others how they want to be treated, not necessarily how I want to be treated. So that's what love looks like. Give me an
example of how you've done that in your relationship so that our listeners know how to apply this principle.
Sure. What it looks like for me is actually showing up and being concerned about whoever it is that I'm relating to or with. A lot of my life, my adult life, I've spent jumping in and out of relationships out of compulsion and addiction, for one thing, but also I've done it for a self-serving purpose. I've wanted to be in relationships to get my needs met, and I hardly ever considered the needs of anyone else that I was relating to. So that's looking a lot different for me lately. And I'm understanding for myself that whatever it is I'm participating in that involves another person, it doesn't feel healthy for me if all I'm focused on is what I'm going to get out of the situation, and I'm not paying more attention to what it is that I'm going to give and bring to the situation, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I'm talking about post-traumatic growth a lot, and certainly one of the aspects of post-traumatic growth is giving back, and whatever you've learned in your lifetime, turning that into something very positive and then giving back to that person. And so what you're saying is, in a relationship, it's really important to stay focused on that other person. Now, what's the difference between that and codependency?
That's a great question, and I would venture to say that there is a very fine line, at least for myself. I have noticed that because I can be one of two speeds sometimes. I can either want to be completely self-absorbed and self-centered in when I'm relating to others, or I can want to be completely about that other person and make it all about them and their moods and their attitudes, letting it affect my life, etc. So self-care has to be a part of relating to others as well for me so that I don't slip into the codependency, which is very easy for me to do. And I'm learning as well how not to do that. I'm learning balance, what it looks like. And generally it feels uncomfortable when I make my entire life about someone else. And I'm learning to pay attention to my gut feelings. I don't always take action on them. I'm still learning and progressing. But I'm learning to pay attention to my gut feeling around how something makes me feel internally. And I can really use that as a compass. I'm getting too wrapped up in someone else. Too much of my brain power and energy is being dedicated to someone else's causes and situations, then I need to take a step back and try to, again, but it goes back to something that's self-serving. For me, codependency is self-serving. I don't think of myself as a people pleaser. I've been a people user. I've pleased people to use them to validate myself. I've been on this quest for validation my entire life, and it's almost killed me. I'm glad to not be where I was with that, but I'm still a work in progress.
Okay, so how did you get to that point where there was so much self-awareness you realized that it was killing you?
Well, for me, I guess they call it hitting rock bottom, and my rock bottom looked like being a 25-year-old woman who weighed almost 400 pounds, who was diagnosed as type 2 diabetic as well as hypertensive, could barely move my body in the ways that normal, healthy individuals move their bodies, taking steps, walking, things like that. So that's what it looked like for me, and the weight, et cetera, which to this date I've taken off about 172 pounds through various involvement with support groups, et cetera. But the weight and all the shame and guilt that I was carrying around became an indicator to me that too wrapped up in everything but myself. I had completely neglected self-care. In fact, I don't think I ever really learned self-care. And so instead of self-care, I used self-medication through food, through sexual relationships, through alcohol, whatever I could use to get outside of feelings. And the result was a very, very unhealthy individual at that time. So once I started looking at those core issues, then honestly the path continues to be laid. The more work I do, the more focus I put on some of these maladaptive traits that I've lived with for years, then I see other ways of relating to others and other ways of relating to myself and how I want to show up.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And, you just mentioned, another addiction that you had, which obviously was compulsive overeating. And what we know about sex addicts is that obviously they are typically riddled with multiple addictions, whether it's gambling, overspending, overeating, drugs, alcohol, sexting, any of that stuff combined is a tricky situation, because when sex addiction is under control, one of the other addictions can become worse. And so you've been dealing with an eating disorder longer than you've been dealing with a sex addiction. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
And it sounds like in your eating disorder, with the help of a 12-step program, you started working on self-love and self-care and nurturing.
Yes.
Now, was that the same kind of recovery tools, if you will, that you also practiced with your sexual addiction?
Yes. Yes and no.
Okay.
Something that, for me, what varies around the sex addiction, and I watched a movie that touched on sex addiction called Thanks for Sharing. Very great movie, in my opinion. And they talked about the difference between, having a disorder or a disease where you actually use some kind of substance, food, alcohol, drugs, whatever. The difference with that and a sex addiction is, with a sex addiction, the pipe, so to speak, or the alcohol or whatever it is attached to your body, being my genitals, if I can say that. Because one thing that I really struggled with was compulsive masturbation. I can't take myself off of myself, in order to not do that. So it calls for me to be a lot more honest about what goes on in my day-to-day life around my sex addiction. And it's the same with my food as well. The food, I eat 3 meals a day, nothing in between. That's what I choose to do. That's worked for me for a little over 4 years. But I have to learn other ways and other things to do around the sex addiction to keep myself occupied, to not go there with myself or others when I get into those stressful situations or whatever might come up. Because my mind can be one of two speeds. with those addictions. It's either I want to eat something or I want to sleep with someone. When I get into those really, icky emotional spaces. So I've had to learn tools for both of those situations that present themselves for me. And while they are the same, they vary a bit as well. I hope that made sense.
Oh, 100%. Now, I'm wondering if you're looking at tools that will help to produce a healthy love. Mm-hmm. What do you see as those tools so that you could actually cultivate the best relationship possible?
Mm-hmm. Something that my sponsor had me go through, and I say had me, I volunteered, and I was glad to do it, kind of. He had me come up with a dating plan. We actually met and sat down and talked about some of the criteria that I feel like goes into healthy dating and getting to know someone. Because the way that I shook hands, and this is kind of to be humorous but not really, the way that I shook hands was to meet someone, decide that, okay, this person is who I want to be with in a matter of days, sometimes a matter of hours, depending on how crazy I was. Then I'd have a sexual relationship with this person and then try to go about the business of getting to know this person and care about this person. But that's backwards for me, and that never really produced the results that I wanted. Because if I'm having sex with someone that I don't know, and this is for myself only, if I'm having sex with someone that I don't know, then I am acting out of compulsion and dysfunction for myself. Because part of my process in healing around my sex addiction and love addiction as well is for me to give myself time to get to know someone and let them get to know me before we decide to do anything physical. So something that I think has been very helpful in even working towards cultivating a friendship with someone is to start out knowing what my limitations are, knowing what I'm not willing to do. I take sex off the table for the first few months of getting to know someone. I take going to someone's home off the table in the first few months of getting to know someone, or inviting someone into my home. And these are all ways that I want to keep us on the up and up and out in public venues, because I don't have a lot of control when I get in spaces alone with someone that I find myself to be attracted to. So in cultivating love relationships, I even have to remind myself to start out as friends. I've always thought that I skipped that part of it. If I have sexual attraction to someone, well, for me that was like a green light to just go and do whatever I wanted to do with this person physically and not consider the consequences. I don't look at it like that now. I want to get to know people and let them get to know me, because I feel like some of the greatest relationships I've had the opportunity to be around started out as friendships, establishing a firm bond of just a friendship. Hey, I like you as a person and I want to support you, and you like me and you want to support me, without all the other romantic kind of stuff in there.
Well, absolutely, and what I hear is a really good sense of boundaries. In developing and cultivating a healthy relationship, you keep those boundaries pretty safe so that you can actually get to know the person before you get physical. Because let's face it, once you're physical, you open yourself up to a world of hurt or you begin to connect to that physicality as opposed to the person.
Right. And what you said there is something that I'm really just coming to understand in the last year or so, maybe, that emotional vulnerability that I open myself up to when I'm physically intimate with someone. I never looked at that before, and I always thought, in my addictive mind, that I was driving the bus here, because I'm usually the one who would start up to talk about, physical intimacy. I'm usually the one who would be the aggressor in the situations I found myself in. And so I let that go to my head to mean that I was controlling the situation and that I knew what I was doing and that I was getting my needs met and that was okay. And I was not. I was hurting myself. And just to double back to what we talked about around the co-addictions, what I'd do is I'd have some sexual encounter with someone that made me feel miserable, and afterwards I would eat or drink myself into a stupor to try not to feel what I'd just done, and then I'd let a couple days go by, I'd do it again, and I'd get back on that same loop again. So I see where the emotional distress was coming in, but I didn't want to recognize it, of course, because I wasn't ready, and because I thought that what I was doing was okay, and it wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes 100%. Now, so many people, when they are looking for love, they feel impatient. And, I will say to them, if you're not finding love, why don't you at least work on finding love for yourself, with yourself, and create that gift for you as a person, and then we can continue on that journey of putting yourself in places where like-minded people go and doing volunteer activities so that you're raising that vibrational energy some and serving others and maybe creating love in different ways other than that relationship love.
Mhm. It's absolutely
essential. So, did you
essential.
do any of that?
Absolutely, and I am in the process of doing that. And I was saying there, it's absolutely essential, at least I think, that we learn to love and accept ourselves first before we go out and try to relate to another person in an intimate, romantic kind of way. I am 31 years old, and I am just learning what it is that I like to do outside of addictive behaviors. Like I have, and I think you've mentioned before, the 3 circles approach comes along with some of the Sex Addicts Anonymous fellowships. I have an entire list of outer circle behaviors that are behaviors that I participate in that are okay for me and don't trigger me to want to act out sexually. So I'm getting acquainted with my outer circle list, writing poetry, riding my bicycle, going to lunch or dinner with a family member, spending time with family and friends, reading books, watching a favorite TV show on Netflix. Like, these are things that I enjoy, and I'm just really coming to understand that these things make me feel good about myself, and there are more to that list than those that I mentioned, but just I am having to get in touch with myself and what I like and where I like to go and how I like to spend my time. And what I'm finding is in doing that, like you mentioned, I meet other like-minded individuals who are potential partners. Some aren't, some are. But I put myself in a better space to be connected to someone that I have things in common with as I continue to explore the things that make me feel good about me.
Well, that totally makes sense. And would you say that prior to a real solid recovery, that you were impatient to find that kind of love?
If I'm honest with you now, I'd say I'm still impatient, Carol. Actually, my sponsor had me sit down and write out what it means to be patient, what it means to be impatient, what has impatience brought about for me, the consequences of my impatience, etc. That's something that I am still in the throes of. Some days I want microwave love, meaning, hey, I can pop it in there, get it out in 30 seconds, a minute, however long. And that's just not sustainable. We want the love that comes from the oven, right? Loving from the oven. Absolutely. And so I'm learning that if I want something with someone that's going to be worth its weight in salt, I'm going to have to be patient with myself.
Okay, so I got another question for you. Do you think that you can love someone without knowing them?
I would say yes. And I can be a little hippy-dippy and in the blue goo sometimes. I think I was a hippie in my past life because I'm one in my present life. But I really do feel like we can love someone without knowing them. Now, what kind of love it is, I think it's a humanistic love and respect that I tend to have for individuals in general, just because, and not saying that in a perfect kind of way, but just I'm learning that I love individuals just because they are and because I am. They don't have to earn my love. They don't have to do anything to show me that they're worth loving. I love them because I love me. And the more that I love me, the more capable I become of loving others. So I do think we can love someone without knowing them. Now, is it that romantic, we're going to be together forever kind of love? I don't know if it's that kind, but I do think we're capable of loving without necessarily knowing someone.
Well, I would agree with that absolutely. And yet, in some respects, I run into a lot of people who make decisions about others based on their head, heart, and gut. And, it's like, what do they think of the other person? And they don't know them that well, but that lust or that infatuation or that hormone, dopamine gets produced, and their thinking is somewhat fragmented and not based on reality. And then emotionally, because they're feeling such strong feelings, they end up making decisions about that person based on their emotions. And emotions can get you in trouble if you don't know a person long enough to really see if they stand up through the test of time. So I agree with you, and I also think that there's probably a lot of women and men, but particularly women who, let's just say that they don't give the experience long enough to really know what they're getting into.
Right. And what I think you're touching on there is something that I heard recently in a workshop that I attended, which they talked about intimacy versus intensity. And I think we get those two confused, and I know I certainly have in past situations where, like you mentioned, I get the dopamine release and I get the feelings going, and I'm so sure that I am having these strong connections to this person and I have to be with this person, and I'm thinking about it all day, and, that's intensity. And intensity does not hold up to intimacy. Intimacy for me means letting another person get to see me over time in all my different spaces, moods, attitudes, etc., and letting myself get to realize and know a person in all their moods, attitudes, different settings. What are they like with their family? What are they like with their friends? What are they like when they're disappointed and something doesn't go their way? What are they like when they're joyful or experiencing great excitement? What am I like when I'm experiencing excitement or disappointment? That's intimacy. Into me, you see, is how I've heard it said, instead of intensity, which, you burn so bright so quickly, you burn out, is the way I've experienced it.
Oh, good point. There's no doubt about that. And how would you define intimacy? What's your idea of intimacy?
For me, intimacy is when I show up to a situation completely emotionally naked. Now, those levels of emotional nakedness, of course, they evolve over the time that I spend with someone, but I really feel that I'm being intimate with someone when I show up without any underhanded expectations, without any manipulation, without any focus on what the outcome will be, but I just show up as myself and allow someone to see me. That's what intimacy means to me. And I know what intimacy means to me because I've spent so much time doing the opposite, showing up, wanting to be manipulative, wanting to skew things a certain way to get what I want, how I want, when I want. That wasn't intimacy for me. That was control, and that was addictive behavior. So intimacy now means showing up honestly, authentically, as who I am at that moment and saying, hey, this is me.
Okay. And so what if a person chooses not to develop that intimacy, not to love? Does that make them a bad person?
I don't think so. I think we're all different, and for whatever reason, that person that's choosing not to show up and be intimate or open, they have their reasons, you know. I don't think it makes us a bad person. I just think it's a thing. It's a choice.
Well,
just like the choice to love.
Yeah, I know that you and I have talked before about the program of sex and love addiction. And so oftentimes in love addiction, love pursuers hook up with love avoiders. And and so I wondered, can you tell if somebody is not wanting that intimacy?
I can. And what I do with what I can tell, now that depends on where I am in my own recovery. But I've had a situation recently where I really felt some of that intensity that we talked about. I met an individual. We got to know each other. You know, we spent some time together. We were physically intimate with each other. I had expectations of this developing into a relationship because I cared. At least I felt that I cared very deeply and strongly for this person. Well, I thought the feeling was mutual until the other person started to let me know, hey, look, I don't really want to participate in, you know, a relationship at this time. I have things going on that are taking up my time. I don't want to be, you know, I don't want to be in any committed deal right now. I'm sorry that this happened the way that it did, and so on and so forth. And that was very painful. But like you said, I was a love pursuer in that situation, and you really brought that point home for me, and this person was an avoider. And so what happens in those situations, as I've experienced it, is the more I chase, the more they run. And even that's like a high for me sometimes, because some part of me always feels that I have to prove my worth, prove my validity, prove. And so nothing gets that going for me more than trying to chase after someone. And I've just recently surrendered that chase and decided, hey, that happened the way that it was supposed to happen. I'm fine. That person's fine. I still consider them to be someone that's a good friend, you know, at a distance, and I'm going on with my life.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, truly, I don't know what it is, but sometimes I'll get women that think they're sex addicts, and really what they are is love addicts, and they're using sex as a way of winning over, manipulating, gauging the man in hopes of really having a relationship. And I believe that there are 5 fears of intimacy, and typically they fit the profile of an addict, and one of them is fear of being hurt, and the other is fear of hurting others. Then there's fear of merger, kind of losing that sense of identity, fear of rejection, and fear of abandonment. And I always ask my addicts who seem to be getting into relationships where they're not getting their needs met, and, you know, the harder they try, the faster the other person runs. You know, if there was a fear of intimacy here, what would you be most afraid of? If you fell in love, would you worry most about being abandoned, rejected, that you'd lose your identity, that you'd hurt them, or you'd be hurt? And almost always they can figure that part out, and that plays into that fear of intimacy that sets them up for love avoidance and love pursuance. You know, that's part of that love addiction profile that also fits addicts.
I'm just over, if you could see me, I'm just over here nodding my head yes to everything that you just said. Those are all really big fears for me. And it ties in there somehow, but commitment in general is a huge fear for me. And I worked with a therapist who used to bring that up and say, you have a fear of commitment. And I would say, no, I don't. I've just been hurt. I've been abandoned, so on and so forth. But there is really a huge fear of commitment there for me. And those others that you mentioned, I'm very fearful of letting someone get to see me intimately and they abandon me. I'm very afraid of merging with someone and losing my identity and then they abandon me. So all of those that you mentioned are very real fears that I present with. And also even going back a little bit to where you mentioned that a lot of women come to discover that they're not necessarily sex addicts, but they're more addicted to love and use sex as a way to try to pull love from men or, however they choose their sexual orientation. That's something that I'm also discovering for myself. Sex in and of itself was something that I've used to try to gain the love of partners that I wanted to be with. I've wanted to be seen is my biggest thing. I've wanted to be seen. I've wanted to be validated. I've wanted to be loved. I've wanted someone to tell me all these things, that I haven't been able to give to myself. And through that, I use sex because I thought that is the only way that I would be able to do that. I had sexual abuse in my past, and so what that taught me at an early age is that I was a sexual object, and so that's what I had to bring to the table. And as an adult woman, I thought, okay, if I can't get them based off my looks, because I mentioned to you that I was a very large woman, and some people found that attractive, but some did not. So I felt like if I can't get them based off my looks, then I'm going to get them based off my sexual prowess. I'm going to learn how to do that very well, and that's going to make people love me. And it never did. And it left me hurt and conflicted and all those things we already spoke of. So absolutely, everything that you said there was very accurate for me around the fears of intimacy.
Well, and I clearly believe that, you're a person that has worked so hard at bettering yourself and self-care, and you've utilized, a support network. 12-step recovery is so important in healing the wounds and having that spiritual transformation and doing that character check. You've really done a great job of that. So as we begin to wrap up, Danielle, I'm wondering, as you continue your journey and you're looking at love, what other piece of advice would you offer our listening audience who may really want to improve their relationships and love more deeply and more meaningfully?
Wow, that's a big one there. What I would say is, and this is one of my favorite quotes, I don't know where I got it from or who said it, charity starts at home. So I cannot keep what I don't give away. If I want to be someone who is an authentic lover, who cares about my partner, who is actually there to serve, and be a part of a connection with someone, I have to give that to myself initially. I have to love myself. I have to know that I'm enough before merging myself with someone else, because it's been my experience that when I haven't known that I was enough and I merged myself with someone else, I spent the entire relationship looking for that person to fix me, to bring something to the table that I couldn't bring. Basically, I became dependent on that person, which was unfair to them because they weren't in a relationship. They were more of a caretaker. They were more of someone that was there for my amusement and my enjoyment, and I completely disregarded them almost altogether. So I would definitely suggest to anyone that, may suffer with sexual addiction or love addiction, who's looking to down the line get into a healthy relationship, I would say love yourself first by honoring all those things that you present with and doing the work. And then once you have and feel ready to start looking into opportunities to relate to others, then go ahead, go for it. But it starts at home, love yourself first. Understand the things about yourself that are good as well, because I can beat the crap out of myself around all of this, I'm never going to do this or I'm never going to do that. And I have to also look at those parts of me that are functioning properly. I've put a lot of work into how I live my life, and I'm proud of myself. I'm excited about the possibilities of myself going forward. So self-love and self-care, very important.
Yeah. Self-love, self-care, and self-talk, We have 60,000 thoughts a day, and most of them are negative. And they're not negative like, I hate myself, but they're negative like, oh, I don't think he'll call. oh, I must have done something wrong. Oh, I don't weigh the right weight. It could just be anything. So, I agree with you. Self-love, self-care, and as we end, I'd like for you to share with our listening audience 5 things that you do that improve that sense of self-care.
Okay. 5 things that I do that improve my sense of self-care. 1, I meditate. Absolutely essential. I meditate first thing in the morning, and it sets the tone for my day. It's like nourishment. I have to do it. And the days that I don't do it, I feel terrible. So I meditate. I make sure to move my body for at least 30 minutes a day. I enjoy riding a bicycle, but I also walk. I recently had a knee surgery, but I also like to run. I'm getting back into that a bit. So moving my body, exercise is essential, because that's another way to get those dopamines released that we talked about earlier, and it makes me feel good. I write. I write a ton. I have so many journals scattered around my place. I'm always writing, because connecting my hand to a pen and connecting it to a piece of paper does something to help me empty out all those thoughts that you said, those 60,000 thoughts in our brain, onto a piece of paper. It helps me clear some space up so that I'm open and available to more of my day. I eat nutritious food, and that comes along, of course, with the other fellowship that I told you that I'm a part of. And that's a part of self-care for me, eating nutritiously. I have to. I don't do the junk food. I try to keep it really simple, from the plant to my plate kind of approach. And, of course, that's very imperfect. But I make sure that I'm nourishing my body with good food. And the last thing is I do something fun regularly, and that's new for me. I've been from serious city. It's like I have to be serious. I have to, I have to be taken seriously. I have to take me seriously. And that has burnt me out. And so now I'm learning to do fun things like coloring pictures or going out for walks in nature. That's so fun to me, and I love it. Or spending time with individuals that I care about, getting a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. I have to build fun into my life.
Yeah, that's so
Those are the 5 things that I do.
I love that. That's excellent. And those are all relatively simple. I have to say that of all those that you mentioned, the one that seems to give people the biggest problem is meditating. And I encourage them just to meditate for 5 minutes a day, just to sit in quiet and see, what kinds of thoughts and feelings direct them from that gap in between the thoughts.
It's helpful. And like you said, 5 minutes. I started out 5 minutes a day about maybe 5 years ago, and I'm up to about 20 minutes a day now. And I've heard it said that the only wrong way to meditate is to not meditate at all. So I try to give myself a lot of space to just be in my meditation practice. And it works for me. It de-stresses. It gives me the opportunity to get centered in myself. It's magnificent. One of the sharpest tools I have in my shed.
Well, I admire the fact that you're working so many of those recovery tools, and I tell people who are sex addicts, love addicts, or partners of sex addicts or love addicts that clearly if you're working a 12-step group and you are doing the actual steps within the program, whatever that would be, and you're talking to your sponsor and you're doing fellowship and you've got a good counselor and you're in some group therapy and you're meditating, praying, journaling, and then using anything else that would help you. If you're a sex addict, that might be filters, or if you're a love addict, that might mean that you have an accountability that you always talk to before you call him or her. Whatever that is, those 10 tools will help you maintain your recovery. And Danielle, you seem to do them all.
Work in progress, yes. And I'm getting more
and
open to
too.
doing some of them. Yeah. Absolutely. The one that you mentioned is something that I'm trying to do more of. It's calling. My sponsor is very available, always has been, and I'm very lucky in that area. So when a call doesn't happen, it's generally because I've made the decision not to make it happen. And so I'm being called to look more at that going forward, making those calls before I call someone else that I'm interested in to discuss why I'm going to call or what I'm looking to gain from the call, or if there's even a need for me to make a call. So I'm really trying to step up my efforts around making phone calls, and not only to my sponsor, to others in the fellowship as well who are accountability people for me.
Well, and you know as well as I that when you call somebody to get some help, on some level you're typically helping them too. So it's a full circle process, and that's always a fantastic thing.
Certainly.
So I just really appreciate you sharing tonight, and you've got a lot of wisdom, and you obviously work a good program, and I hope that we can talk again. I know you have some other topics that you've been studying and expanding on, so we will talk with you again. I just really appreciate your contribution to this very specialized work.
I thank you so much for the opportunity, and I appreciate what you're doing. It's awesome, so thank you.
No, you're welcome. You have a great week, and we will talk again soon.
You do the same, and happy holidays to you.
Hey, happy holidays to you also. Have a good one.
Okay, bye. All right.
So I was just talking with Danielle, who was talking about love and how she finds it to be so important to actually pay attention to the other person, look for ways to empathize and to serve, and at the same time, simultaneously, take care of herself. It's a delicate balance between great self-care, understanding what your needs are, and then in relationship with others, really staying present and focusing on them. And asking yourself again, hey, how can I serve? What can I do for you? And we don't have enough information on this show about healthy love, so it was good to get to talk with her tonight. All right, well, that's the end of the show, and I always so appreciate my opportunity to work with you all and spend time and keep sending me emails to carolthecoach@AOL.com, and feel free to go to my website, Sex Help with Carol the Coach. If you think that you have a sexual addiction, take the test on my site, and if it looks pretty problematic, I can set you up with a much more intensive test that will give you lots of feedback about what you need to do next. You're not alone in this. I'm here with you. There's a whole support group. There's lots and lots of books. There's lots of trainings and intensives and opportunities for resources out there. And that's what I see myself doing, is helping you access those resources. So you have a happy holiday. I won't be talking with you next week, but I will have a very good show. I think I'm going to replay the Dr. Karn show. And as I say at the end of every show, there will only be one of you at all times. So fearlessly have the courage to be yourself. And we'll talk to you soon. Happy holidays.